My name is Alex Katz and I'm coming to you from the land of the Colleen nations in Melbourne. We're here with two guests, Reverend Colleen and Rabbi Daniel. I'll introduce them in a minute, but let me begin by saying that this conversation series will hopefully be a regular series where I'll interview clergy and speak about some of the festivals that are coming up in a pre-recorded way so that members of the Council of Christians and Jews can view it at their own time. Today we have, as I said, Reverend Canon Dr. Colleen O'Reilly AM. And so my first question that I'll ask you to begin with is the last time we met, and as for those who may recall, these two guests were our first guests when the world changed and we started doing our events on Zoom. At that time they spoke about Passover and Easter in lockdown. So my first question is maybe you can reflect a little on the last 2 years and how that's been for you and your congregations.
Well, I think the first year when we were celebrating Holy Week and Easter in lockdown was a shock for people because it's such a profound time of gathering, and people found it difficult, but were very helped by Zoom. And of course there's been a new delight in being able to be together as people have gradually come back to worship together in the church building. One of the advantages of Zoom that many people discovered was that they could go to church virtually anywhere in the world, and so you could enjoy beautiful worship from New York or London or around Australia. They could Zoom into congregations of friends, so it did expand people's horizons, even though in lockdown it was difficult to be with one another.
And Rabbi Daniel Rabin, I'm sure you had similar experience, but for you it's also been a change. The last time we saw you, you were the Rabbi of South Caulfield Synagogue. Here today we're sitting in your new synagogue, the Caulfield Synagogue, and I know you also personally moved house. So tell me the last 2 years how it's been for you and your communities.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Colleen. It's nice to be with you in person this time as opposed to virtually. And of course, Alex, thank you for inviting me once again. Similar sentiments that Colleen just shared, but it has been, aside for obviously the global change and the global impact that it's had, as you mentioned, there's been a bit of change in my life too, going from South Caulfield to North Caulfield, a new congregation. But really over the major time through the pandemic, a lot of the focus was on keeping the community connected. That was our goal. We didn't want to abandon our flock, and so our tools at our disposal were fortunately Zoom and other technologies that had arisen at the time. And yeah, that was the main focus, to keep people connected, to keep people plugged in, if you like. And obviously as Orthodox Jews, there was some challenge to some of the holidays which we couldn't do, use technology. There were some advantages to that. There was a bit of time to switch off when your whole life was just technology. But really the great success that we've seen is that those who we managed to keep in touch with over that time through Zoom are now gradually coming back. And as Colleen said so correctly, there's nothing greater than being in person with people. And I think, from the family experiences at home to the people coming to synagogue, people want to be together. And thank God, and let's hope stays that way, that this year we can celebrate both our holidays in the way that we'd love to do it.
Yeah. So on that note, Passover and Easter for both our faiths are seminal festivals, if you like. To me, I've always felt that the two are somewhat linked. I know historically they are. The Last Supper was probably a Passover Seder. And so this year in particular, Passover and Easter start on the same day, and to me it feels like the calendar is right this year. When they don't coincide at all, or when they don't correlate at all, then I feel like something's wrong in the calendar. So this year it feels like the calendar is in tune. So Rabbi Daniel, let's start with you on this one. Do you feel that sense at all? And do you see any connection between Passover and Easter, especially, as I say, this year when they are so connected?
So it's an excellent question, and I don't mean to sound naive or whatsoever, but because I'm so busy with Pesach and Passover, I haven't really given much time to think about the correlation. I do remember, growing up in South Africa, where they had over the Pesach break, they always had this the Rand Easter show, they called it, and it was a massive get together and so I remember it was always felt connected, that we could connect with another part of another religious community and faith community in South Africa. So there was always that correlation and that excitement where we were celebrating Pesach and we saw our Christian brothers and sisters celebrating their holiday. And in terms of the calendar, it is interesting when they do coincide. But the Jewish calendar tries to, it's really about the times in Israel. the seasons in Israel, and that's the additional month would have been added to ensure that it was in the right time. And I spoke about it on Shabbat that going back in biblical times and in Talmudic times, when the people had to come from all over Israel for the pilgrimage to the Beit HaMikdash, to the temple, there would be a committee of people who would decide whether they're going to add a new month because the roads were still wet and they couldn't travel, and so they would say, let's make another month until it's the right season for people to be able to come and celebrate Passover. So it is wonderful to know because it just feels festive. The Jews are celebrating their holiday, you guys celebrating your holiday. I think it adds to the festivity of the community in general.
And Reverend Colleen, the same question to you, but maybe with an added section that this year Ramadan is also this month, so maybe you can draw some parallels to that as well, if you can.
Yes, it's apparently quite an extraordinary convergence this year. I'm told by my Muslim friends about once every 20 years this happens, and of course our consciousness of our Muslim brothers and sisters has grown enormously, and thanks be to God, in the last few years. So there was a time when I wouldn't have been aware of that in the way that we are now. And I recall other times when Passover and the first, what we call Maundy Thursday, Holy Thursday, the first day of the 3 great days that we keep, have coincided, and it's always struck me as very special when they coincide. And I've had the privilege of being at Passover meals at Seder's, which is just a lovely invitation to receive. And I can remember one year when I was invited to a Passover meal being held in the hall of the parish where I was priest, and I took some matzo from the meal table, went across to the church, presided at a Eucharist using the matzo, and then came back and finished the evening with the Jewish people in the hall. So there was something very special about that, very, for me, sort of poignant as well, that what unites us also separates us, and my belief is that was never the intention, but that's the reality we live with. And as I was thinking about today, I was thinking it's a bit like being on shipboard where you have one table but 2 sittings for the same meal. And I thought that was the image that came to mind as I thought about it. But
interesting.
Thursday evening, seeing that moon and knowing that the Jewish community is gathering, the Christian community is gathering, that delights me.
Beautiful.
I've actually also been, I had a Passover meal once in a church hall, so I understand exactly where you're coming from in that sense. As I said at the beginning, Passover is one of these seminal festivals that I think everyone celebrates in Judaism. I think that everyone at least has some matzah, even if they don't go necessarily to a Passover meal, and Easter eggs are obviously common, and for that might not be such a Christian thing, but nonetheless. So maybe you can tell us a little about why you think Passover and Easter particularly are such seminal festivals within your traditions.
For Christians, Easter is a great festival of freedom, in the sense of we understand that freedom not just to be physical freedom, but symbolic freedom, freedom from all that is destructive of life. And the sign that is God's purpose for us is the resurrection of Jesus.
And Daniel?
So I think, look, it's interesting because it's I haven't seen really too many stats whether it is, but I have heard anecdotally what you've expressed, that a lot of people in some way celebrate Passover, and some people would suggest more than the Jewish New Year. I think for two reasons. One, the whole symbolism of Pesach is a message which resonates with people. It was the beginning of the nation's rebirth, if you like, being enslaved for all those years, and now starting on the journey towards, getting the Torah, getting the 10 Commandments and so on. And so it represents, I think, opportunity. It represents the birth of a nation. And so I think that's resonated ever since that point in time. And also I think because it has a very strong family value, the Pesach Seder is very family oriented, and so people like when they can get together with family. And so I think even if people are not religious or following to the strict letter of the law, they'll get together and they'll buy a box of matzah. And when I lived in America, I remember I lived in Atlanta, Georgia, a different place, and you go to, it's amazing how you see, they sell matzah all year round, and in the Jewish section, as if we're eating it. That's our favorite food. So there is that family experience, which we lacked obviously in the first year.
When I was growing up, our neighbour came for a Passover Seder meal one time, and she loved matzah so much that she bought it all year round because she loved it, but also as a dietary food, but just in general, she really liked it, which is possibly unlike most Jews, I'd venture to say.
It's meant to be the bread of affliction.
Well, exactly right. So it's not necessarily the greatest tasting bread. And just to finish off, one final question. The last 2 years have obviously been tumultuous for all of us, but I feel like, especially for these festivals, and in general, but specifically for Passover and Easter, there might be some learnings, something that we can take with us in terms of adaptability, in terms of how we celebrate these festivals that are very much to do with freedom, even though we're restricted in some ways. So maybe you can finish off by reflecting on that. Maybe, Colleen, you'd like to start.
Yes, that's a good question, and not something I'd given a great deal of thought, but yeah.
Well, I would suggest something that's been on my mind is that, you know, a lot of the festivals, especially when it comes to the Jewish tradition, often people get very fixated on some of the pragmatic peripheral ideas, you know, the shopping and the cooking and all the different things, and again, this is not a criticism of everybody, but, you know, human nature is we lose the message, we lose what's really important, and so I think coming out of 2 years of COVID, perhaps COVID taught us to ignore the mundane things, the trivial things, the things which we used to get so fixated about, and really it made us focus on important things. You know, what's really valuable to me? You know, who was an essential worker? You know, how can I see my grandparents or my children? And so maybe taking that message and saying, you know, this holiday we can be together, but let's try and look at the themes of the holiday. What is it supposed to actually do for us? How do we come in one end? You know, your conveyor belt. You come in one end and you want to look different the other end. I'm not talking about putting on weight from all the food, but, you know, coming in one end and the other end, am I going to be a different human being? Am I going to be a more refined, a kinder, a more generous, a more tolerant, you know? And if the answer is no, then we've got to rethink it and say, okay, let's make Passover actually meaningful this year.
Yes, and I think for Christians, one of the challenges is not to focus on the afterlife, which has very much been, since for a lot of Christians, that's been a primary focus, but to realise that the new life that we believe comes with the raising of Jesus begins now, and it's about the humanity that we live now and the love that we share with everyone indiscriminately now that is so important.
So thank you both very much for your time and for your very great insights into this upcoming festival. For everyone out there, Ramadan Kareem, happy Passover, happy Easter. Also, kosher Passover is one thing that we say as well.
Oh.
And as I said at the beginning, this will be hopefully an ongoing conversation series that the Council of Christians and Jews was putting on. So stay tuned for further episodes.